How much does a producer make?
Did you go to school? What did you study?
What's a showrunner? I've never heard of that.
What does a director do?
What's the best part of your job? How do I get in?
Who do I need to know?
It's time to ask your questions.
We're here for you.
Welcome to 101, a podcast for young women interested in careers in film and TV.
We'll sit down with industry professionals, ask them your questions, and get the answers you need to know.
101. It's a beginning.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 101, a podcast. We are here with Ari Rothschild. Ari is a DP and colorist. How's your day going? Everything going well?
So far, so good. I have a new cat house that the cats are actually playing in after, I don't know, like it's been in the window for like a year or so, and they finally have gotten around to expressing some interest. So I'm like, hooray!
So how long have you been a DP, and when did you get into coloring?
So my dad didn't grow up religious, found Chabad Judaism in his early 20s, and ended up in an arranged marriage as a school teacher. And he shot the Jewish kids show using students and my brothers and sisters, and I was the camera guy. So I was like 11, and he hands me this, broadcast camera this was public access, so this is running alongside like Christian stuff, and we were doing the weird Jewish stuff. And I'm 11, and he's like, hold the camera close to your hips, angle of gravity, and point upwards and look down into the viewfinder. And I did it, and I loved how it looked. And that was it.
Wow, so young.
Yeah, I was very sure about myself. I was having dreams where I was like looking through viewfinders. I got a Olympus OM10 film camera, and I was shooting obsessively. And I was in rabbinical school at this point, and had the hat and jacket and everything else and the beard. And the one thing that I had that was creative, that was my own, was photography. I became a photojournalist. I worked for Metro in New York for 3 years. I was a photo editor as well. And I did that until I moved to India with my partner, who was studying Indian classical dance. Kuchipudi, Kathak, these Indian classical forms. And I did some art photography, had 2 shows, didn't really sell anything, and got approached to shoot this feature called Quab. And I literally read, I think, the 3 C's of cinematography and kind of figured out what to do. And I was basically saying yes to it. And I was shooting on like a 5D on a gimbal and underwater or whatever. And it was like, I can't stop doing this no matter what. Sorry. And it was bonkers, because like shooting Bollywood stuff is bonkers. I nearly died. So many stories, but just this I'll say this about filmmaking: it's this very expensive collaborative art form. And when you get the chance to be sort of making magic work through the extension of all these other people who are running around, and all the equipment and the actors and the lights and whatever, it's a hugely powerful hit to see that come up on screen, to see it work out. It's unlike anything else, for me personally.
So how would you define your role?
Succinctly, I would say that a DP is a translator, translates the spoken word, the script, the idea, the concept, into the lived reality on set. That lived reality on set is a complex reality, mostly involving, human beings working with each other. The reality is that it's a collaborative art that costs a lot of money. So
I love that, and it's so true.
Yeah, really.
It is a collaborative art, and it does cost a lot of money.
And if you can't handle, I would say, number one, your own insecurities. If you can't deal with getting your idea out of your head into someone else's head, then it doesn't really matter what you show up to set with. You're you're gonna fail, right? So I would say that the job of a director, I would say director and director of photography, really, or any head of department, by extension, is to translate the script into a working reality. And by extension, like, you've got to work with people and get what needs to get done with people who are on no sleep and haven't seen their family and friends in a while, and maybe very cold, and stressed out and hungry or hot or whatever. And that's a skill I think that's taken me, I don't know, a good decade or so to really wrap my head around. Yeah.
Now, I just want to backtrack a little bit because I think we're connecting on the fact that it is collaborative and expensive.
Yeah.
But to our listeners who are just starting out, there are lots of creative ways that you can start. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Like you can start experimenting as a high schooler, as a middle schooler. You guys can start experimenting in lots of ways that our generation did not have at our fingertips.
100%. Look, if I had to go back and talk to like an early version of myself, yes, there is an element of like, the Blackmagic Pocket is, $1,400, right? And you're shooting internal ProRes. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how bonkers that is. I would say that like, given how low the cost of entry is and how creative you can be, the sort of like maxim, just go out and just shoot with anything you have. Yes, that's totally true, right? You can go out and shoot with anything you have, and you should. But I would add to that, I would say go out and shoot with what you have, but shoot something that you care about with people that you want to work with down the line. Because there's a lot of work that doesn't go anywhere. A lot of stuff just dies in a hard drive or goes to some remote festival and never gets seen anywhere. And it's much, much better to make things that you have a stake in and a creative voice in, rather than just coming in as a day player on someone else's short that isn't going anywhere. So, move your career forward with people that you want to have a career with when you're going out and shooting.
How do you know the people that you're not supposed to work with?
That's a really, really good question. That's taken me about 10 years to
And it's a
to
privilege
figure
to
out.
say no. So,
Yeah. Really avoid narcissists. just off the top of my head. I know this isn't like directly related to DPing, but I would say like, look, if you can talk to someone and say no, and they take you seriously, that's a great sign. If you put an idea forward and someone gives you credit for it, that's a great sign. If you feel supported through the creative process and that you're working on something together, that's a great sign. If you come to something and you feel disposable and you feel stressed and you're not contributing in a way that feels good to you, then don't work with that person down the line. I think any film that's out there that's really working, I think you're going to see good collaboration.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense that like, it's not about the camera because everyone shoots on different cameras. It's not about, one particular technique or whatever else it is. It really is about creative collaboration. Put it to you this way, like, all right, I had a director who I worked with for a little while, and he sat me down and he had a spreadsheet of all of the low budget first films, that had started directors' careers out. So he had Following, he had Pi, he had Eraserhead, yada, yada. And he literally was struggling to come up with some sort of like explanation as to what was it with these films. Was it black and white? Was it horror? Was it the horror genre? Is it there a certain moodiness to it? Like, what is it? That's the secret with And what I told him was I was like, no, like these are all perfect low budget shorts in that they're creative and quirky, and they're all 100% different from each other. None of them have anything else in common. So if you're going to compete with, expensive stuff, that has actors and, sets and whatever else, you're competing on creativity, right? So if you're going out and making your low budget short, I would say go make the weirdest, craziest, most imaginative thing that you can come up with friends. No one like shut anyone down and calling, no one like, let's get over ourselves and just make something collaboratively. And then you have something that's great. That's so rare. It's so shatteringly rare to see people working together like that. I can't even begin to tell you.
You did touch a little bit about the moment that you knew that you wanted to be in the industry at age 11, which I think is fabulous. And then flash forward later on when you were shooting the film, the Bollywood film. Do you think you could kind of break down for our listeners what your day-to-day responsibilities as a DP are? Like what's a typical day for you? I know it may be a little bit different depending on where you are in the journey of a project. But if you could frame it out a little bit for us, that would be so helpful.
I am in early prep for another feature, but that's months away. And I am doing color on The Redeemer, which is something that we shot about a month and a half ago. And I am, okay, day to day, I am watching movies with the sound off, trying to figure out what they did, how they did it. I'll sometimes bring in a film into Resolve and I'll look at things on the histogram and just see how we lit things. It's a great way to work. And I do a lot of reading and a lot of listening and a lot of researching, just trying to nail down a couple things. A, how do they do it? And B, do I like it or not? A lot of the times I'll see something and I'm just like, I don't love that. And that's a good thing to know. Getting into prep. Getting into prep is probably the hardest part of a film, I would say. And also really where it either dies or comes together and works out. And prep is basically, you know, how close are our promises that we're making to the director, to each other, and expectations with what we're actually going to end up dealing with in reality. And for me, like, you know, I just shot a thing in Montana in, you know, under 20-degree weather. And so for me, like, a huge focus of that was the batteries, you know, because your batteries are going to lose a certain amount of voltage depending on how cold it is. So how do you test that? Well, you stick them in the freezer, pull them out, and now you know exactly how much runtime you're going to have per battery. And then you start working on, you know, keeping them warm, putting little beanies, and, you know, we found these like little stick-on, you know, heating pads or whatever. But small things like that literally will destroy you if you're not ready for them. Because if you're on set and you thought you had, you know, 8 hours of runtime and you've only got 4, you're dead, right? So you see a lot of like, you know, worrying for the future, you know, problem solving in prep, right? The other thing that really, really helps is to go to locations without anyone, or to go to locations with the whole scout team and ask people to leave the room and to have 2 or 3 minutes in the room with a notepad. You, just the director, just you. I've had like whole scenes come together like that, right? So prep is like, wow, let my imagination go. What do I love? What do I want to see happen here? You know, and you sort of get a little bit of an attachment to it. Now, really important, you start imagining things, you need to run that by the director. Because if you're showing up with this stuff that you're attached to and he or she or they are not, problems, right? So you're kind of getting your imagination in sync with the director. Now, if you can get into their heads, all the better. If you can run through and say, in this scene, how are you thinking of affecting the audience at this part of the scene? You know, what do you want to, you know, what works for you here? Would that really be a close-up? Do we really want a lot of close-ups? Maybe, you know, we're doing a sort of like a wide environmental close-up. We're on a 20 and we're 3 or 4 feet away from the actor's face and we can see someone in the background. Like, how much information are we sharing? What are we doing? All good stuff to not negotiate in front of your whole cast and crew, right? So you've gotten through pre-production and you're on set and you're in production itself, right? And you're going to be really, really moving quickly, right? And you know, it comes together for like a little second and then it kind of falls apart. And you get the setup and you get all the lights together and you get these small windows where like everything comes together for a brief period of time and you get that thing to work, right? It's so much work to get to that point. And it's really important to remember that you have good people that you can trust and talk to. And it's really easy to, a lot of people coming at you with suggestions, let's try this, let's try this, let's try it. It's really easy to compromise on what you and the director have figured out is the heart of the film. And I would say the most important thing to do in production is to maintain that close connection with the director, or if you are the director, with your DP, and to keep everybody making the same movie that you agreed to make from the beginning. I think that's important.
I love that you started out as a photographer, and then, you know, it's moved you into this other world. That specificity of why this photograph, like this perspective, does that, like, can you talk about how that informs you as a DP? Because I feel like it really would.
The structure of like shooting a story is you're basically like kind of like a cat and you're kind of like creeping around very slowly in the background. And you're trying to find something that illustrates like a fundamental truth about the story that you're photographing, right? And oftentimes that's something that is a vantage point. You're gonna perch somewhere and just wait and then find a little moment that really like shows what's going on to the audience, right? I don't think it's very far apart when you're watching a blocking rehearsal or trying to get a blocking rehearsal to happen, where you're kind of quiet in the room and I still move around and I look at things And the difference is that with a blocking rehearsal, you can actually tell your actors, hey, can we try this out? Which is a big no-no in photojournalism. And to sort of elaborate on that a little bit, it's like I come in and I see night scenes a certain way, and I see actors moving through space in a certain way, and I see myself moving with them in a certain way, and then it works. And at this point, I can say with a fair degree of confidence, I'm bragging a tiny bit, but I've colored, I don't know, 40 or 50 features at this point, and this was my 12th feature, shooting my 12th feature. I had a pretty good idea of how it was going to look as we were going into it, right? And it's just like immensely, immensely satisfying and gratifying to really see it come up that way. As an art form, film is so delicate and finicky to get right. You really, really are working with people, It's so hard to manage. And people's headspaces get in the way of things, and everyone wants something different, and some people have different visions for what you're trying to do. And so if you've managed to keep everyone calm, relatively happy, no like outright anyone pulling off towards left field when you're trying to drive right, if you got all that coming together, and it's a night setup, and there's 6-7 units, and you got whatever go up in the air, and this is coming down, and people are walking through it, and a lantern that's finally working or whatever, and it looks good, I mean, it's a lot. It's like you're balancing everything together. It looks good. Okay. That is the job that I literally will be doing until I die. And I don't think I'll ever do anything else.
So that would be like the best part of your job, you would say, like having everything come together and see the magic come to life?
So it's been really hard for me to watch my work in a theater with people because I'm very critical, right? So I've had a couple of experiences recently where I screened for cast and crew on Redeemer, on the last feature. And we had some scenes that were absolutely, I had one scene in particular that I cried while I was shooting it. We screened it and I felt the room and everyone was in the same headspace. Now, it's not fun to be crying in a room with your people. There's nothing fun about that. Cathartic, satisfying, beautiful, emotionally, all that stuff, yes. 100%. So that's the part I think that I'm learning to enjoy more, is sharing things in a non-critical way and seeing other people be affected by it in a non-critical way. If you want to enjoy your work, get comfortable with your inner artist, your inner child, and you won't be as critical about watching your work, and that will help you in the edit. That will help you on set. That will help you when you're writing.
Ari, I feel like you're revealing lots of holes in our questions.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because you're talking about these really important things for artists, being comfortable with your work, how to navigate that. And it's different for everybody, but it's a real vulnerable place to be. So thank you for sharing that with us. I am gonna shift a little bit and ask you, what do you think is the most difficult part of doing what you love? What's the most difficult part of your job?
The most difficult part of being a DP is failure. In this industry, you basically get hired off of the success of your last work. And as a DP, you are responsible for the visual elements of the film. And if something doesn't work, that's on you. And failure takes not getting hired for a particular job. It takes working on something and it not looking or feeling the way that you wanted it to. It can take many, many forms. I mean, I still have shots that didn't happen, and I still will have flashbacks in the shower. Oh, that shot that didn't work out. Oh well.
So how do you navigate that? Because that's it's a big thing to live with, to exist with. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate it? Do you, are there things that you talk to yourself about? Or do you journal? Or do you just think about it and try to solve it? How do you handle that? Because that's something that every artist, whether you are an actor, whether you're a director, anyone that's in any kind of discipline in this industry is going to have to deal with this. So what's your advice, or what do you recommend?
So dealing with failure on a personal level, when you're just working with yourself, you just have to build up your reserve of self-confidence and creativity, and that means doing things on your own, going back to Artist's Way, like the Artist Date, you go out once a week, you do something on your own without anyone else. For me, like going hiking, I was walking in the park for a little bit, and you come back and you're just like, you know what, like trees are beautiful. I'm sorry. you know?
Perspective. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. And then, like, a lot of this matters a lot less than we think it does. So I think if you're dealing with failure, it's really, 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 really good to see things in context, be forgiving, be gentle with yourself, and to just work with people who aren't going to hold you to an impossible standard.
So I guess we can switch to sort of, if you're comfortable with talking about pay, just walk us through that if you can.
So I'm going to focus specifically on features because that's been my experience. I've done narrative and feature work. I've done almost no commercial work whatsoever. If you're working indie and you're non-union, the union has tiers 0 through 3. There are the rates, set rates that you're going to be making. But if you're non-union and you're working, low budget films, there is basically a cutoff at $1 million, right? So I'd say if you're doing a feature $1 million and under, somewhere between $250 and $600 is going to be great, and it's going to depend on the shooting schedule, and it's really going to depend on what we're paying lead actors and what hotels we're putting them up in. That will shift money around quite a bit.
Ari, thank you for covering that, because in my experience as a producer, having the conversation about rate is always like, everyone's uncomfortable. Everyone. I'm uncomfortable. The talent is uncomfortable, and we want to normalize conversations about money, because I feel like creatives who are so vulnerable and ready to do anything and talk about anything, and when it comes to money, we're like, oh. And I think that the more artists talk about money and like how important it is, because we need to live, we need to pay for stuff. So thank you for talking about that with us. I guess the next question is, what do you think needs to change in this industry?
Filmmaking, because of its nature, is going to favor people who are able to come up with money faster. And it's not surprising that filmmaking as a whole in the United States reflects some of the larger issues with power dynamics that we see in the United States as a whole. It is not easy as a solo artist to create film work because it is an expensive collaborative art. I think that the industry really benefits from having groups like Brooklyn Film Shop, or Film Shop in general, where people can workshop, go to accelerator programs, go to labs or whatever, and get access to these resources. I personally would love to see some sort of group that's based around a camera and like a small lighting package, and for like $100 a month or whatever, you can take this camera out. I would love to see things like that.
Yeah, just more
accessibility.
Yeah,
more accessibility. I love that. I think that's wonderful. I've seen people who, they're at a loss because the equipment and getting the things that they need to do what they love is just out of reach.
There have been entire film revolutions that were built around sticking a light bulb off of the whole French New Wave. That entire style of lighting came out of people who were creative and doing what they wanted, right? My biggest issue with the industry in the US is how derivative and stacked towards just profit and making money for people who already have money. And I would say that the really creative, interesting stuff is always coming from people who are doing it for themselves and not really doing it for, producers or whatever, right? And, I think that having a co-op model and having a camera that people can take out, and put $100 a month in or whatever and get a camera and some lighting or whatever, I think that that's something that would really allow for, creative voices that we are not hearing. And I think that, I don't want to knock the festivals and the labs and everything else, but to a certain extent, the big criticism that they themselves acknowledge and deal with is that it does feel like it's the same, the same films winning every year, right? It's the same voices that are being heard and yada yada, whatever else. So I think as a DP, being part of, the United States film industry, what I myself have done and continue to do is, if anyone is saying anything that I am aware of that's racist or sexist or whatever, it has to be addressed immediately and in public. All right, the AD has to say something. I think that we have to allow people to speak up if something is unsafe, and that has to take, it has to be an equal power dynamic. The PA can yell cut if something is unsafe. We have to allow for that. I think that as far as the personal influence that I have with the director over the script and how culturally or how sensitive and accurate it is to live realities of other people, I think that's the thing that I can have some input on and influence the best that I can. And then I think the last thing that's important, which I luckily haven't really had to do this, but if you are a DP and you are part of a dynamic that is not good towards anyone on set, you have to be ready to distance yourself and just leave. I think that's ultimately super, super important. And I hope that I don't get to that point, but if I ever did, that would be fine. So shifting our priorities around to we're going to do this right, and if we can't do it right, we're not going to do it, is really, really important, I think.
We haven't really talked about color too much. So once you're finished a job project as a DP or cinematographer, you want to end up coloring your own footage, right? So can you walk us through sort of how long that process takes for a feature, what programs you use, and sort of how do you know what to do? Sure.
So I've colored 40, 50 features, all of them in Resolve except for one. I think I did in Apple Color back in the day. The most useful thing on set, if you're trying to help a colorist out, is to keep your shot lighting consistent. Don't mess with the lighting unless you absolutely have to, shot to shot. Use a light meter, please. Don't underexpose your night footage by more than 2 stops. The basic skill of the DP is to shoot a scene that's cohesive. And as a colorist, if you have to do more than 4 or 5 looks per scene, it gets tricky and hairy, and the whole scene as a whole suffers. So I think you want to try to bring good work in, would be the first thing. And to also know that if you're not bringing good work in, unfortunately, there's only so much that your colorist can do. I'll point to the recent Matrix movie as a small aside. Yeah. If you're going to shoot anything and you're a young and up-and-coming filmmaker, I would say shoot raw if you can, because just shoot raw if you can. It kind of erases the boundaries between a lot of the cameras. You can get away with a lot if you're shooting raw. And in the hands of a good colorist, it's almost, I can say with reasonable confidence that I've been able to, using raw, match Alexa's red, Sony, whatever. So a lot of the look of a camera, it just isn't there if you're shooting raw, because you can change that look using the raw settings. And what you're looking at is, where are your black levels? What's your overall saturation? And how bright are your night scenes? And do you have a mood color? Is there a color in the shadows? Do you have a skin tone that you're going for, right? So specific parameters, and then it's really important to agree with that. If you have to color a couple of scenes and kind of dial that in, but get into agreement with the colorist. A big, big, big part of color is the watch down. So do a watch down halfway through, don't stop, take notes, write down time code, and just get a feel for things that you really can't live with. This whole scene feels wrong, whatever, forest for the trees moment. You're going to be watching this a lot. You're going to go to festivals with it, right? So anything that's really going to bug you, take care of that. But really important, people get stuck on things that have no bearing on reality in color all the time. Like half the notes, or just who cares? Honestly, no one's going to know. You really gotta let that stuff go if you want to get effective work. And you really want to trust your colorist who's done this before to tell you, you can let this go. Or let's not let this go, let's work on this for another hour, And pay, I can't stress this enough, your night scenes really need a healthy exposure. That's personally coming from a colorist background. I cannot stress this enough. No more than 2 stops underexposed per night. Big deal.
Super brief, can you tell us how much a colorist can make, or starting out and then moving forward?
Nice Dissolve, where I was working, was a low-end boutique, and they were charging, I think, $225, $250 an hour. If you're working Technicolor and you're a senior colorist, it's $600 an hour.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Kate, do you want to ask the big number?
The the question that nobody wants to answer, but it's like the fun question. So, what is your favorite film?
Huh. I see why no one wants to answer that. It's such a, probably the reason that it's so hard to answer this is because every film that you're really into is the best film you've ever seen for like until you see the next one, right? So it's like, all right. I tend to really like films that are well executed. So I'm almost like, oh, they did that so well and so little money. That's a huge thing for me. I think the first film that I really dropped in with was when I was a kid. I used to get out of school and go on these long walks with my brother, and we would go to Tower Records and just watch whatever was on the big screen, they had. And I saw Dreams, which is this like very evocative series of shorts by Akira Kurosawa that were pretty dark. And I saw that and I was just like, this is just wildly creative. It's just doing, like, he's doing this for himself, obviously. I love this. And the idea that you could just make a film because you wanted it to look and feel a certain way and it would get out there and other people would respond to it was like, ding, okay, great. That makes sense to me.
I love it. I have to say that's the question we get the most pushback on.
Thank you so much, Ari.
And thank you both. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think it's really hugely brave. Not focus on like trying to do something, for Sundance or whatever, but really trying to do something for the kids who are just getting going and no one knows what's up. Like, I wish I'd had someone to tell me what was up.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that we were connecting on. It's like, I can remember knowing that I wanted to do something. And my mom's a teacher. My dad was a teacher. Like, he taught automotive stuff. Like, they're like, I don't know, you want to be an actor? Like, and it was just, having a resource to kind of learn about lots of different journeys, because the journeys are so different for everyone. So just seeing how everybody gets to where they are is it's pretty valuable. All of the things that you touched on that we didn't even expect, and our listeners are going to learn a ton. So
I'm really happy. Thank you.
Thank you.